All right. Well, I was not going to get to today without offering some sort of preview. So thank you to Marty Caswell and Marty Time Television for providing the platform. I am Darren Smith. He is Eric Comez, who's joining from Mexico City. Eric is an ESPN reporter. Eric has been a frequent guest of the radio show. We always love tapping into his insight. The CONCACAF Champions Cup is coming to Snapdragon Stadium, 8 o'clock, Fox Sports 2, Today NA. There will be no radio tonight. Our first radio broadcast is going to be against Montreal, the MLS season opener. They're expecting about 24,000 people tonight at Snapdragon Stadium, so there's still a handful of tickets available. But for a preview, let us go to Mexico City. He's not far away from Estadio Olímpico, the home of Pumas and SDFC, San Diego Football Club, tonight in the first ever CONCACAF Champions Club match in SDFC history. Eric Comez, thank you for doing this. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, so happy to be here. I mean, it's crazy. Like you said, I'm not too far from Estadio Olímpico, a stadium that hosted the Olympic Games in 1968. And now we're going to get LA 2028, 60 years later. And we're going to have some games in San Diego, which is crazy. It all ties together. I mean, at some point, we're going to get San Diego FC down here, which is, again, like just a sentence I thought I'd never be able to say. It's crazy, but so indicative of the type of success that this club has had in its first year plus of existence. And it's going to be a crazy ride. San Diego soccer fans, I'm sure, are somewhat familiar with the CONCACAF Champions Cup, but this is one of the wildest and, frankly, more entertaining international club competitions in the world. So I can't wait, honestly.
8 o'clock can't come soon enough. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my day. I already woke up with that energy. You're right, too. I mean, the similarities are kind of interesting, right? It was pointed out, I think, on the Chromaniacs podcast. Both play technically in university stadiums. We have the Azul y Oro for Pumas, the Azul y Chrome for SDFC, the Olympic tie-in, which was just announced today that Snapdragon Stadium is going to be hosting Olympic soccer coming up in 2028. But Eric, you just touched on it. CONCACAF Champions Cup, I find myself explaining this to people who are new to the sport. How important is CONCACAF Champions Cup? There's 3 matches today. This is the first round of this tournament for 2026. How important is this? Tigres plays later, Club America, and then SDFC and Pumas. How significant is this? Where does this rank in terms of the types of tournaments, the tournaments that you're going to play in and that you have the potential to win?
You're talking about this being the Champions League for this region in the world, which is clearly a stretch if you've seen the UEFA Champions League and the level of play that teams like Barcelona and Real Madrid and Manchester City and whatnot are able to bring to fans every Tuesday, Wednesday. But this is the most important club competition in the region, in North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. And I think it bears noting that recently it's taken on a more important context, given that the Club World Cup was such a success last year, played entirely in the United States. And now winning this tournament will give you access to an expanded version of that Club World Cup, as was the case in 2025. It's also clearly very important for clubs in Mexico, in the United States, and MLS in general to be able to win it, because you've got bragging rights. This is a region that has been dominated historically by both of these leagues. And the only team from MLS to be able to break through in this particular tournament since I think 2001 is Seattle Sounders, who won in 2021. And they beat this Pumas team that's going to be facing off against San Diego FC. The rest of the time, save I think for 2005, which was a Costa Rican team that won it, the tournament has been dominated by Liga MX. So every single time we've got friendly matches between MLS teams and Liga MX teams, or maybe we play the Leagues Cup, there's always this element, this heated rivalry, people talking about their league being better, their club being better. Liga MX teams and their fans have always been able to point to this tournament and say, hey, this is the big one. You guys have never won this outside of the Seattle Sounders in 2021 over the last 25 years. You guys don't know what it's like. So ultimately, it is very important. San Diego FC, despite the fantastic season in 2025, I should say, they are not favored to win the whole thing. You've got Inter Miami and a bunch of other teams from the League MX side of the bracket who are ahead of San Diego FC in that respect. But you know what? Nobody expected San Diego FC to get to the Western Conference final last year either. So I think this is a fantastic opportunity for the club, for its players, for their fans, to really kind of drop the hammer as they did on their domestic league and do it in an international venue and an international tournament. I think it's just going to be so exciting to have that go on. And tonight's the first step.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, I think it does come down to it's a matter of personal preference too, right? Like for international tournaments versus domestic tournaments, like 20 plus teams have won MLS Cup. That's great. Like I would love to see SDFC get there and win that cup, but you just brought it up. Seattle in the modern era of this tournament is the only MLS side to win, respectfully, towards DC United in 1998 and LA Galaxy, but it was a different tournament then. So I'm with you on that. Tell us a little bit about Pumas. Pumas is considered one of the big four clubs of Liga MX. Cuatro Grandes. Tell us, it seems like it's a little bit of faded glory. Haven't won a trophy in quite some time. 2011, I think, in their domestic league, and this tournament back in 1989. Tell us a little bit, the brief Cliff Notes history of Pumas, who they are, what they're all about, why they're considered one of the big four in Mexico.
This is crazy because a lot of people who are familiar with American sports and not necessarily the way that soccer works, especially in Latin America, I find it strange that a university is fielding a pro soccer team, right? So this is literally the sports incarnation of the National University of Mexico, UNAM. They play on the university's grounds. It was founded in 1962 as a sort of university project, and eventually they were able to, they used Pro Rel to their advantage, and they got to what is now known as Liga MX. They've turned, as you mentioned, into one of those four big teams in Mexico. They've won 7 titles. 2011 was the last one, although they did make the final in 2020, I believe, but they lost that. And they've been also able to parlay that success internationally. They have not won a CONCACAF Champions Cup or Champions League since 1989, but they did make 2 finals in 2005, which is the one I mentioned earlier that they lost to a Costa Rican team, Saprissa, I believe, and then 2022 against the Seattle Sounders. So they are one of the teams that are, I think, most associated with Mexican soccer, because when you talk about the big name players, big name stars that have come out of Pumas, you have to talk about Hugo Sanchez, who is, associated with Real Madrid and the Mexican national team. He came out of Pumas, and just the breadth of players that have been, associated with the Mexican national team mostly for the last 60 years. They've had a very proud tradition of developing players. And as you said, a little bit of faded glory. This is a team that has gone through, coaching change, a general manager change in the last few months. They do have Keylor Navas, who, fans will be, they'll remember his time with Real Madrid. At some point, they had Dani Alves, the former Barcelona star. At some point, they had Aaron Ramsey. I don't want to get into why Aaron Ramsey's no longer with the team, but they're continuing to shoot for the stars, which I think is admirable. They've gotten off to a good start this season in Liga MX, so I think that's kind of a good omen for them as well. Honestly, going into this series, I thought San Diego FC would be the clear favorite, but after 4 match days on Liga MX and Pumas kind of showing me something, I think this is going to be very, very even moving forward, and not the cakewalk that I initially expected for San Diego FC, even though that might sound strange to some people.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Good form. I know I saw that score on Friday night. I saw that they just took apart Santos, and it's not a great version of Santos, but 2 wins, a couple of draws, 3 goals allowed in 4 matches for Keylor Navas, who, as you said, 3-time Champions League winner with Real Madrid. It's going to be, again, very surreal to watch him down there on the field coming up a little later, presuming, of course, he plays. Eric, you talked a little bit about the academy of Pumas and how important it's been. One of those academy products is the current head coach, Efrain Juarez, who is in his second season. He took over right before the start of this tournament a year ago. Interesting guy. I stumbled across his press conference. He was very complimentary about SDFC, but he's got a good, very interesting resume as a player and as a coach. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the head coach, Efrain Juarez. Very interesting guy as a player who represented Mexico, played in Scotland, first Mexican player ever to play in Scotland. Won in Atlético Nacional in Colombia. Just an interesting guy to be at the helm right now for Pumas.
This dude's 37. He's younger than I am, and I feel like he, has the biography of somebody who's 70 at this point. He's just lived through so many different things as a player and as a coach. He was 17 and part of that under 17, the World Cup winning team for Mexico in 2005 that beat Brazil. After that tournament, they signed. He and a teammate signed for Barcelona. Never got to play for Barcelona, but as you said, got to play in Spain, got to play in Scotland, first Mexican ever do so. He went to a World Cup with Mexico with the senior team in 2010, part of that Pumas setup. And he had a pretty interesting career. I think he kind of faded out a little quicker than he would have wanted. Injuries were a part of that happening. And then, he decides to end his career in Norway, of all places. He takes a coaching seminar and he starts to really, get ready for the next phase of his career as a manager. He goes to NYCFC in MLS and he's an assistant there for a couple of years. Then he goes back to Europe and he's in Belgium for a couple of years. Then he takes a job. I mean, he'd never taken a managerial job before then. He was always an assistant. But 2024 comes around and he's coaching Atlético Nacional in Colombia. People in Colombia, people in Mexico, people in the US, they're all befuddled by this. They're like, what's going on? Like, why is this guy taking over the reins of one of the most storied teams in Colombian and South American history? I mean, just go look at the types of players that have played for Atlético Nacional to get an idea of how big that team is. And he coaches them to a league title in 2024. So this is unprecedented for many reasons. And then just as quickly, he's out, right? After he wins that title, I think in December of 2024, a couple of weeks later, he does not come to an agreement with the board as far as what signings the team needs, and he's out. March of 2025 rolls around. He signs with Pumas, his boyhood club, and he was kind of a meme there for a while. He was kind of a laughingstock because the team wasn't doing as well as I would have expected, as I said. I think this particular version of Pumas, this roster with Efrain Juarez, is definitely closer to what what we would have expected from the get-go. And they're getting better. They are really, just they're getting stronger, I think, as time goes on, getting accustomed to how Efrain Juarez wants them to play. And I'm honestly, again, I'm a little excited to see what this series is going to be, because if there's somebody who's not going to underestimate an MLS side, it's Efrain Juarez, because he has that experience coaching, or being an assistant coach rather, in MLS.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting too, because when he was talking about preparing for SDFC, he actually referenced FC Northland. He said, "Oh, like the style is FC Northland style," and I was like, "Oh, okay, he's on it." Like he knows exactly what it is that he's looking for here in terms of a very identifiable style. Listen, MLS people moan about this, and it's a valid point. And you brought it up. Pumas and Liga MX, they are 4 games into their season. That's 25% of their way pretty much into the season. You play 17 times. They're already 4 games in. Here you go, right into the deep end of the pool. If you're SDFC, you played a couple of preseason matches, one against San Jose, one against Tijuana, against Cholos. What sort of advantage has that been historically? I mean, how much does that have to do with Liga MX's success in this tournament, that they have a running start? They're already warmed up. They're ready to go, and everybody else is just playing for the first time.
It's a huge advantage. I mean, honestly, you're playing regular season football. You're playing regular season soccer, and MLS teams, no matter who they've got in their roster, and we know that MLS has been a focus of theirs to be able to attract all of these big name European players over the course of their 30-year history. they always kind of fall flat when it comes to facing off against these League MX teams in this tournament, whether it's a league format, whether it's a cup format. We've kind of gone back and forth on that over the last 20 years or so, because of the fact that they're starting cold, right? As you said, they're being thrown into the deep end of the pool. That's going to change starting next year, I believe, when MLS goes into the standard soccer schedule, into the fall to summer thing, that I think is going to be so important for them in the future, not just for transfers and being able to attract even more players, but also competing in this particular tournament. So, as I said before, San Diego FC going into this thing via the preseason, I was looking at them as being favored in this particular series. Now, with all the drama that's gone on with Chucky Lozano and the way that, Mikey Vadas is having to basically, reformat his starting lineup, his style of play against the Pumas team that is looking stronger by the day, I think it's just going to be a lot more difficult than I initially expected for them. And even with MLS having, I think, 9 teams in this tournament, there's really only one team that you're looking at that can break the dominant seal that Liga MX has been able to keep on this tournament, and that's Inter Miami. That's Inter Miami with Lionel Messi and, all the Luis Suarez still, and all the Rodrigo de Paul, Germán Berterame, who they signed from Liga MX just a few days ago. That's the only team that I'm looking at and saying, okay, I buy that. But it is a huge disadvantage to be able to come into such an important tournament and not have played a single minute of regular season soccer, as it were.
Quick, what do you, because we'll have the game coming up at 8:00. What are you expecting? It's 2 legs, right? So you play here tonight in San Diego, then we'll play there in a week's time in Mexico City. There's about 250, 300 SDFC fans that are making that trip, by the way. So that should be an interesting environment. But, these 2-legged ties, as they call them, aggregate scoring away goals. Sometimes the criticism is that the first leg is usually pretty boring. Nobody wants to take any chances, right? And it's a much different game in the second leg. Just looking at it last year, again, different side for Pumas. Lost their opening round match in Canada against Cavalry FC. Won the tie. 1-1 in Costa Rica, 1-1 Vancouver. That was their away results. What are you expecting specifically tonight? Everybody wants to be the protagonist in the match. Both sides have said that they are willing to do so. But what do you think? Are we looking at sort of ball control, sort of, don't take any chances and just see where we're at in a week's time? Do you think we're going to go high flying? Like, what are you expecting? I'd love to know your thoughts.
Yeah, I think Efrain Juarez is not going to be the type of manager that's going to just go out there and speculate, right? I think you put the pressure on San Diego FC because away goals are so important, as you said, in these types of ties. And if you're able to put the pressure on a team, again, that they might be healthy, they might be starting out their season, but they're not particularly in a regular season rhythm, and you're able to get even a 1-goal advantage, that's fantastic. So ultimately, I think this game is not going to be like other first leg games, as you put it, because both of these teams are willing and able to put on a show. And we know that, we've watched San Diego FC come out and consistently attack every single MLS opponent that they had in 2025. I think this is, more symbol of what Mikey Vadas' philosophy is. I think it matches, quite well with Efrain Juarez. And to use an old boxing term, styles make fights, right? And both of these team styles, I think, are going to be quite pleasing to the neutral fan and even the San Diego FC fan and the Pumas fan. So I think it's going to be one of those crazy CONCACAF ties that are really fantastic to watch. And hopefully both of these teams are able to provide us with some fireworks.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. I do. I hope we get 2 sides that are like, hey, let's just go for it. Like let's just not do the traditional thing where we'll play a certain style and then completely try to change it up here in a bit. You mentioned Chucky Lozano, Eric. I got to ask before we wrap up. The clock is ticking. This window is, it's not in perpetuity here. Are you hearing anything on your side of this conversation about Chucky Lozano's future?
Yeah, there is one team in Liga MX that I've heard are very interested in Chucky Lozano. I don't think they would be too excited if I kind of dropped that out there, but ultimately they're in Mexico City. I'll say that. And they appear to be close to an agreement with San Diego FC. We know that San Diego FC are quite hopeful that they get Chucky Lozano off their hands, but I'm not too sure. I haven't heard whether Chucky Lozano is interested in this particular team. Now, one of the issues that I think are still needs to be hammered out is just who pays for what, right? Chucky Lozano is not going to want to give in any of these negotiations and take a reduced salary. We know that. So Chucky Lozano in the top 10 best earners, top earners in MLS in 2025. That type of salary is not a real number. It's not, something that you would see a Liga MX team pay out. So ultimately, San Diego FC and this particular club need to come to some sort of agreement in which they say, all right, it's what, half and half, or we'll take on 70% of this, you take on 30% of this, whatever that combination might be. That's ultimately what is going to make this a quick negotiation or have it drag on.
I saw your ESPN colleague Cesar Hernandez recently say there's a little hesitancy on behalf of Liga MX clubs just because of the World Cup, that if you're going to be a part of the selection for the World Cup, that comes at a time where you might be off to camp, and instead of competing with your club. Have you heard any hesitation on that? I mean, it feels like the kind of thing, like it. Obviously, it's a very plausible thing, and Cesar's a credible reporter, but. Do you think that is potentially something that Liga MX clubs are concerned with?
Yeah, we're talking about a 3-month loan at this point.
Mm-hmm.
February, March, and maybe April. As soon as April rolls around and Javier Aguirre starts calling these guys into camp, there is an agreement between the league and the national team to allow that to happen, regardless of whether it's a FIFA date or not. So. Any team, and again, this is why I brought up the salary negotiations beforehand. If you're any team in Liga MX, you're not going to want to pay for a player that potentially is going to be here for the next 3 months and leave you because he's part of that 26-guy group that is going to the World Cup, right? If you're fighting for a title, and this is a team that ultimately is aspiring to win a Liga MX title, that doesn't sound too appealing to me, honestly. So I think what's going to end up happening is if that particular negotiation gets done, San Diego FC is going to have to pony up more than half of what Chucky Lozano is making right now in order to make it happen. So I understand that, there's willingness on San Diego FC's part, but they don't want to get taken to the cleaners ultimately. I mean, you don't want to be paying for 80%, 90% of that salary, what have you. And Chucky Lozano has had some, attitude problems in the past. We don't need to get into that. That's been very, very, very much reported over the last few months, especially with the San Diego FC thing. But there is that part of the negotiation as well. Are you willing to take on a player that invariably will cause an issue, whether it's within, the locker room itself, confrontation with the manager, confrontation with the technical staff? If it is an off the field thing with his entourage, with his family, that's not too appealing either. So I would be equally surprised if this deal gets done quickly. And I would be equally surprised if Chucky Lozano is kind of scrambling to find a club by March or even April at this point.
By the way, you said we won't get into it here, but I do want to recommend to anybody that wants to hear Eric talk more about this. You joined Herculez Gomez on Vamos, the Men in Blazers podcast, and you guys did go into great detail about Chucky Lozano. So I do want to recommend that for anybody that might have missed it. Eric, give us a quick prediction. What are you thinking for tonight?
Yeah, for tonight, I think San Diego FC takes a 2-1 lead over Pumas. I think, as I said before, Pumas is not necessarily going to throw caution to the wind, but they're not going to go out there and just build a defensive fortress. And I think San Diego FC is going to shock some people. I think, the one goal advantage isn't enough to be able to think that Pumas won't take it. I think you laid out a very good historical premise that, a lot of these Mexican teams tend to falter away from home, but then when they get to Mexico City, when they get to Guadalajara, when they get to Monterrey, they're able to really focus in and move forward. I think that's going to happen ultimately. I think I might have spoiled what I think is going to happen in the second leg as well, but at least for tonight, I expect San Diego FC to win.
All right, good. I would agree with you as well. I think it'll come down to next week in Mexico City at Estadio Olímpico. Looking forward to that. We will see you next week. Thank you for doing this. Appreciate your insight as always. Enjoy the matches tonight. We got 3 of them. Again, I wish we were calling these on radio, but CONCACAF makes things just a little trickier than MLS. So we will be there before too long. Eric Comez, thank you very much. And congrats, by the way. I saw the news that the NFL is returning to Mexico City. So you'll have fun. Some plenty to discuss, and we'll have plenty to discuss as well. Thanks, pal. Appreciate you.
Great to talk to you, my friend.